So, hi, Miisa. It's great to have you on the podcast today.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. I'm really excited to get stuck into our conversation today because I know you've got just so much experience to bring, and you've got all this background in branding. You set up the Driven Women network, of which is just amazing. And I know we're going to have so much wisdom that's going to come out of that. Not just the idea of setting it up, but also what you've seen works for women in business. But I'd really love to start with your journey. So, how did you get your business started in the first place?
So my first business was actually business within a big corporation. So at the time, I was working in one of the leading branding agencies in the world, based in London, and I got a call from one of the really big global advertising networks, and they wanted me to come and set up a branding agency for them in Europe. And that's what I ended up doing very successfully. I opened up 4 agencies across Europe, and I had a little slice in the business, and which was actually, that's a story in itself, because originally when I got the call, I went to the interview, and they knew about me. They knew that they wanted me, and I got a sense that, because I had everything they basically needed, but they didn't offer me a partnership. They offered me a salary. And I was like, well, I have a job. I don't need a job. And I opened on a plane and flew back. And they were like, oh, but we can't give you stock because this is listed in the New York Stock Exchange and da 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 da. I was like, okay, that's fine. That's not my problem. It's your problem. I have a job. I don't need a job. Thank you very much. So I'm very happy that I actually walked away from that room, because 10 months later, my phone call rang again, and they had gone to New York and they got the stock for me. And then I started the business. So, but I have to say, it was, of course, it was like a semi-entrepreneurship, because when you are inside a company, they have the HR department, they have the accounting, they have like all of these support functions. And I was just able to focus on getting clients, building a team, and doing all of those things, which I really enjoyed. So that was a wonderful sort of soft launch into starting a business. So that was my first business, the branding agency.
And I love that you asked for what you wanted. And I think that's I've got a book on my shelf called Women Don't Ask. And we tend to know, oh, this is what I would really want. This is what would be nice. And then we're offered something, we're like, oh, okay then. So I love that you put your foot down and said, well, actually, that's not what I'm looking for. That's not going to benefit me as much as I want it to. So thank you very much. See you later. I mean, that must have taken a lot of courage.
Well, yes. And it really was the truth for me at the time, because I really had a brilliant job, and I was already in charge of 2 countries and big clients, and I was doing great sales and all of that. So I thought, why would I do the same thing just because they need me and exciting and I can create something from scratch? And these are all of the things that we're lured into, like, oh, they really need me. Oh, and then we do that. So that's why I was able to walk out of that room that day. And I think a big lesson that taught me was, you can work as hard as you like. You can do long hours. You can absolutely slave yourself, but it doesn't mean that you actually make a lot of money or become massively successful. It's those little moments in life when you have a chance to get some leverage from who you are that really matter. I mean, that conversation, it was probably half an hour, 45 minutes. And that moment when I said those words was like, what, 30 seconds? And that's what changed my life. Because that was the first time I made some like serious, at least at the time, like it was a serious chunk of money when I left and sold my shares. So it wasn't, I could have worked equally hard, done, equally good job, and just left with nothing more than a paycheck. So I would encourage people to really spend more time on appreciating their value, their skills, their talents, and less time working sometimes, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and ask for what you want and ask for more, because you always get negotiated down. No one ever negotiates up. So really go wild, really say, well, this is really what I want. And then you got some, I say, you got some leverage to move where you want to go with that. So that was your first introduction to entrepreneurship. What happened next?
Then I just had this internal, I don't know, intuition that I needed to move forward, and there was several things happening in my life, and soon enough I had left and sold my shares, and this is very lucky. It's 2007, just before the financial crash. So also listen to your intuition, you know. If I did it 1 year later, maybe I didn't, you know, get that that paycheck out of the stock. Then very soon I was pregnant with twin boys, and I think that needed to happen to me, because otherwise I wouldn't have like taken really time off, and I was really exhausted for many years from that experience. And then I started to explore. I thought I didn't want to do exactly the same thing I did before. I didn't want to start another design agency, branding agency, even though I absolutely love that. So I did different things. I was a angel investor. I got involved with a small startup. I started another startup in fashion tech, which was a lot of fun. And then I founded Driven Woman. So I had a lot of things going on. And then little by little, I knew that I had to kind of cut things and narrow things down. But that really gave me a chance to explore what my next chapter was. I didn't put pressure on just doing one thing initially.
I like that you took the time to discover and try different things and see which really spoke to you, which you could. And I think more and more when we have our business, it's really a chance for us to really discover who we are, what our true potential is, and really live our purpose through that. But it's not something that you wake up one morning and think, oh, this is what I was put on this earth to do. For some people, it is that clear, but for a lot of us, it takes a bit of experimentation and trying different things and seeing what really lights you up. Was there anything that helped you guide yourself from one project to another? Did you just blindly say yes to anything, or was there anything in specifically you were trying to get from each experience?
I think it was more sort of what I was drawn to do. Mm-hmm. So I listened to that kind of intuition. So and yeah, very soon you're kind of filled up, right? And then you get too busy, and then you go like, okay, which one is not my most biggest priority? Where is my heart here? Mm-hmm. But I have to say that Driven Woman, which ended up being my passion and my real purpose, was the scariest thing to do. So because I'm a doer, I love building businesses. So it was easy to launch myself into these other projects. Whereas the way Driven Woman was born was when I one day kind of gave myself a permission to ask this very deep question to myself. Okay, you've been building everybody else's brands up to now. What if you build your own brand? What if you were the brand? What if you built something that was based on who you are, your talents, your personality, your values? What would you create? And that's how Driven Woman was born. And that was super, super scary.
I love that question. What would your brand be? And just to take a completely different perspective on what it is that you want to create. And I think that's just such a powerful question. And I also love that you said, you know, when you were looking at which business to invest your time in and which ones to stay with, you really like, well, where's my heart in this? And I think that's such, again, another powerful question, especially for women, because I think we have a big advantage over men in that our instincts are so powerful and we can be led by our heart. And sometimes that's seen as a bad thing to do, but I think our, you know, if we look inside, our body tells us, we know what the right thing to do is. And often we're just, it's scary. As you say, that the thing that has had the biggest impact in your life was the thing that was the scariest to do. So if it was so scary, how did you actually go for it? What was it that drove you to keep going and not just saying, oh, I'll just take this easy thing over here?
Well, it's kind of, once it's out of the bag, you can't put it back in. So once I discovered this, once I sat down, and I had created this. So one of the things I was doing at the time was I wanted to set up a personal branding agency. So helping celebrities and sports people and whatnot to really express their brand, not just what they do, but, on that kind of values and purpose level. But it wasn't really going anywhere, which was kind of a sign for then me to say, okay, Miisa, take your own medicine. And I had created this tool where you basically look at your talents, your values, your personality, and your purpose. And it's now one of our foundation tools at Driven Woman. It's called My Life Pyramid. So I sat down and I remember spending 2.5 hours doing this and really kind of getting under the skin of myself and thinking, what did I enjoy when I was 12, when I was really like, what did get me excited? And I really kind of did this proper self-discovery session with myself. And then when I discovered what I needed to do, and I had no experience in building networks, in kind of women's empowerment, none of that. But it connected so deeply with me that there was no turning back. So every time, and what I did was also I launched it immediately. I didn't go like write a business plan or the blog was up and running in 2 weeks. It was up. I had created the logo with one of my old graphic designers, and I had the tagline, I had the name. Everybody hated the name at the time, by the way. We can talk about that. So it was out there, and I was so scared. I was so scared in so many levels. I thought, oh my God, what people are going to say, because she's this branding consultant. What is she doing now? Running some women's groups? Did she go crazy? And all of these like chatter. But every time when I tried to talk myself out of it, I was like, well, but what else? This is my purpose. I'm safe in my purpose. So I always landed back in the same place. And then over time, I started letting go of everything else and really trusting that intuition and trusting that this is my path. I have the right to be here, and this is what I want to do. And this is my mission. So it was a kind of the initial getting out there, and then it was a process after that.
Yeah. I love that you just trusted your instinct and went for it. Because I think sometimes if we don't just move and get things into action, then we can start second guessing ourselves, and then we're like, oh well, I'll do the plan, and then oh, but is it the perfect plan? And oh, maybe I should run it by these people, and we end up just never getting anywhere. So I love that you just leapt in and it worked.
Exactly. And anybody who's interested how bad my writing was at the time, I haven't deleted anything on that blog. So if you go to the Driven Woman blog, all the old rubbish is there. I left it on purpose because women need to see that that's how it goes. Don't worry about it. And in the beginning, you don't even have an audience, so it doesn't matter. And now it's 7.5 years, so hopefully my writing's got a little bit better.
Yeah, I love doing that and going to people's old blogs and going on YouTube and checking out people's old videos, and you can really see how far a lot of the thought leaders that we all know have how far they've come, and their original videos that they were just so bad or the blog posts were, but you can still see that there was an intention there, that they wanted to help or they wanted to express something specifically. It's just the craft has changed. And I think even if you don't do things perfectly, if the intention is there, then people still feel that. If you're on brand, even if it's just not perfect yet and polished, that doesn't matter. So I think there's a lot of power in just starting somewhere and then growing from there. Because if you don't start, then you obviously don't get anywhere.
Well, this is it. And I had a lot of passion, and I guess I've always been very genuine. in my delivery, and that resonated with some people, and they joined the journey. And I think what people don't realize when they start a business is that the people who come with you in the beginning, who buy from you or who come to your focus group or pilot or whatever it is that you're creating, they are not actually your customers. They are the ones who co-create with you. So we have such a pressure of thinking like, oh, I need this, the customers and da da da. But they are not your customers. They might pay you a little bit of money, hopefully, but they are actually co-creating it with you. And it takes time before you really land in what you're creating. So as soon as you can invite these people on the journey with you and start exploring how to best deliver the idea, the better.
Yeah, I love that idea that your early supporters are your co-creators, and the nice thing about those, as you kind of alluded to, was that they'll support you for the long term because they feel really part of your journey and almost a responsibility. When people are part of your business and they don't just sit on the awareness stage where they're just kind of watching, but they're actually taking part and getting involved and contributing to that, then it's not just your brand anymore, it's theirs. And I think that's the thing with a brand, isn't it, that I see a lot of business owners miss. It's not your brand. You can do the right things to kind of try and get that right impression out there, be consistent and all of this, but your brand is what you mean to other people. And would you agree with that?
I would totally agree with that. And it's been some of the most satisfying moments and fulfilling moments in my life when I hear, sometimes getting these messages where the women say that I was in the situation, and normally, so for instance, about asking, we have a lot of people who are starting businesses or wanting to take their career to the next level. And then they sent me this message that, you know what? I was there, I was in the situation, and then I heard like, okay, what does a driven woman do here? What are our values? Oh, we ask. So then I asked, and then this and this happened. So I was able to create and give them that, and that really connected with that community. And the brand became almost a tool for them to do all of those things that they want to do. So I think brand is not just some one-dimensional thing on your business card on your website. It is so much deeper. And as you said, you don't own it. It's what it means to your clients, your community, your co-creators.
So do you think a brand is something that every business needs early on, or is this something that they can kind of work on or work towards a bit later? At what stage do you think they should really start to think about their brand?
So this is a very, very interesting question. And I would say that, like with anything, whoever is listening, you're the only person who can judge kind of where you are. And there's no like ultimate truth to this thing. However, I do want to say two things. One is, of course, it doesn't make sense in the beginning to pay like some agency to, build you like massively expensive logos and this and that and some brand strategy, blah, blah, blah. So get the thing going with the resources you have. But having said that, the sooner you can engage with your brand and really decide, okay, what do I stand for? What does this thing stand for? The sooner you will start connecting with the audience in, I would say, more efficient and deeper way, rather than if your message is always like on Monday is this and on Tuesday it's that. It's very difficult then for people to kind of get a hang of what is it. And if you try to speak to everybody, then you speak to nobody. So the sooner you can actually make decisions and decide what you stand for, how you're going to deliver your message, and start building some sort of visuals around that, the better.
Yeah.
So yes and no.
Yeah. And I think it's really important, as you say, to stand for something and be clear what that is. And, the logo and the colors and things that can always come later. But if you're known for something specific or a certain point of view or a certain passion, I mean, that's your brand too, right? So
exactly. And don't be worried that it can evolve. So it's not like, oh my God, I have to get it absolutely right, therefore I say nothing, and I don't know which one of these bits it is. So try to trust your intuition and your instinct at that kind of first step, and whatever feels right, choose that.
Yeah.
And then as the journey continues, you get more and more co-creators, and you learn with your community, with your clients, with your consumers. Then you can fine tune it, then you can find new angles, and the brand can move along.
Yeah, because you're always growing, and so is your audience. As they come with you on that journey, then if you do change and evolve and grow that message or make it more specific, then the audience, people sometimes worry that the audience will disappear, but it's almost the opposite. They're like, yes, exactly. And I remember when I really, I didn't really do much with my brand. I just decided it's just not bold enough. I'm going to make it more bold. And the number of people was like, yeah, we've been waiting for this. Brilliant. You think, oh, great. Then you realize that you have created a brand and it is bigger than you. And that's just so exciting.
Exactly. And I think when you start expressing your brand in more bold ways, whatever that means for you, and becoming more visible, all sorts of interest, you allow interesting things to happen. And for instance, I found one of my co-founders this way, and she has, because she comes from the world of communications, and she's very familiar with brands. She always worked with big brands. And she confessed some time ago that if I didn't have this like really professional, really, well presented brand, and if it was all over the shop, she wouldn't have paid attention, or not to mention become a co-founder. So you start attracting similar sort of crowd.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a nice signal that you're serious about what you do, that this isn't just some kind of little thing that you're doing on the side, and it will change tomorrow. This is your thing you're passionate about, and you're kind of committed to that. So yeah, I think it really has, it's that promise and commitment.
And if you don't have big budgets, I mean, Canva is a fantastic tool. And if you have absolutely no visual eye, I'm sure everybody knows somebody who is like good with their wardrobe or something, has a little bit of a better eye, and just ask for help and say, can you like create 2 templates for me? That's, at the end of the day, that's all it is something that can be simple, and then you just have to be consistent. And one day when you have more resources, then you can hire somebody to do some design work. But it is more a choice and a principle rather than a question of resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for mentioning that, because I think that's another concern, that if I do a branding, it's a really expensive exercise, and done well with a professional, which is always great to invest in, it can be, but you don't have to start there. Yeah. So I know Driven Women in itself is a whole nother fascinating story. So you talked about how you decided this is what I'm going to do, and there was just something that it was one of those ideas that just wouldn't go, and so you knew you had to pursue it. But it's been 7 years now, and it's really developed over that time, but it's also gone through its own evolution, and it didn't, I know from what I had the previous discussions, it wasn't always a smooth ride. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned through that journey, from setting up that, because it's quite a different sort of business, isn't it?
Yes. So I found it on a question, which was, how can I create a framework that helps women move forwards towards their goals? And I was open to saying, okay, at the time it was like, I thought it was going to be like a women's network. But I was always open that it could be something else, that the delivery and the product could be something else, that as long as I kept answering that core question, which has been our mission from the start. So the format didn't actually massively change. We started with small support groups of 15 women who meet once a month and support each other and keep each other accountable, which is the core thing, and commit to 5 steps they're going to do before the next meeting. And in the beginning, it was really, as I said, it was kind of a passion project side thing. I was busy on other things. So it took another 3-4 years before I actually said, okay, I'm going to stop doing these other things. But in that time, and I'm really happy I had that, and I didn't put pressure on it, because it was able to become organically what it needed to become. And it started growing through the success stories of the members. And they said, oh, I want to open a group. Or can I open a group? And then we start opening these groups around Europe. And then I raised some money on crowdfunding through Crowdcube. That was 2018. In April, we closed. So I raised over 100,000, mostly from the community. I mean, it was 95% came from the community. And that's good to know if you're thinking of crowdfunding. It's a lot of work. If you don't have a community, I don't recommend it. So, and then at the time, the plan was, okay, we are going to just open Europe full of these groups. And that's what we did. And what we learned was that our assumptions were not correct. So the idea was that people who would open these groups, they would go then reach into their networks and bring the members. So women were actually very happy running these groups. That wasn't the problem. We found lots of fantastic women, but women didn't want to sell. They didn't want to do that sales piece. And then we ended up like I remember being completely exhausted of admin and like all sorts of things that I really didn't want to do. I didn't set up this business to do these things. And the revenue growth wasn't fast enough. We just hit the wall. And it's fantastic to hit the wall, I tell you, because then you have to pivot and you go like, okay, what's the part that's not working, and why are we doing this, and how can we evolve? So with that money, we managed to still have enough left to launch our online program and platform. And but then that was kind of gone. So that meant that the online piece wasn't growing fast enough, because as you know, building an online thing is, it takes time. And if you want to grow fast, you need to spend a little bit of money on advertising and so on. So we had to look at things with fresh eyes again. It's like, okay, the product really works. We have fantastic community online. How do we actually bring in more cash? So then we said, okay, let's sell this to companies. And that felt like a really fantastic strategy. And this is 2019. And we started approaching big corporates that, their women would benefit from this program. And we got a really good response, and we signed 1 or 2 deals, and then COVID happened, beginning of 2020. And then all companies like closed all funding tabs, and that was it. And then we hit a wall again. It's like, oh my God, what do we do? So, but we just said, okay, let's just cut everything which isn't necessary and do everything as well as we can, and just nurture what we have and grow what we can, and kind of develop maybe things that inspire the community meanwhile, when clearly not much is happening. So last year was kind of, it wasn't fast. It was very slow on all fronts. And that's exactly what we did. And now everything is moving again. So trusting that there is different cycles, and you will get through it, and you have the right to be here, and you are resourceful, and you can do this. And now the companies are coming back, and the community is growing again. So I think it's very important to understand that this is a long journey, and there's going to be all sorts of twists and turns. And as long as you are doing what you love and you are meant to be doing that, then stay with it.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. Every business goes through cycles. There's a global disaster, typically every 10 years. We had the recession, we had the September 11th, all of these things. It's every 10 years there's some big catastrophe. But these are moments where we can take a step back and start to ask those questions. And I think that's something really interesting about your journey, is you started with a great question, which was, how can we create a framework that will help women reach their goals? And that was what helped you to develop something that was potentially going to be a women's network, but actually ended up being more than that, and something really supportive. But then at each time you hit a wall, you're like, okay, well, what's the lesson here, and what's the next question we need to be asking? So like, how could this be simpler? What don't we need anymore? What is working? Where do we need to focus our time and attention? So I love that you didn't take any of these moments as points of okay, now we have to stop. This is proof it's not working. Instead it was like, okay, well, this is proof that we've reached the next cycle. What do we learn from this situation? Let's explore this and then make a change and evolve and pivot with that. And I think that's just such a healthy approach that we can all learn from, that will really help us step by step make our businesses stronger and stronger. Because if the going is good the whole time, it's just too easy. We're not going to learn anything from that. And then as soon as we have any catastrophes, then the whole thing falls down. But we can use these opportunities to build that inner strength in our business. So I think it's just such an inspiring story. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you. And I think one thing that we always looked at was, because there's almost like there's the product and your co-creators, your community, your customers, consumers, however you call them. Are you delivering value for them? Is that working?
Yeah,
that's the core question. Because if that's not working, then you might have to challenge more and you might have to change more. But that was always delivering. We always were. I mean, we're getting amazing results, and the feedback, and it's such a loyal, engaged community, and people are getting real value. And I've always known that. So it wasn't about that. It was about how do we then scale that? How do we, improve so that we have more cash coming in, essentially, and how do we cover our overhead? So can we let go of something? Are we, is there some costs that are not necessary? So there's these two sides of things. And I think it's very important to understand the difference. Is the product failing, or is the other stuff kind of not right?
Yeah, there's the value in the delivery. And yeah, I love that idea that you have to keep looking at what's working in both areas, not just have that single track. Now, you've been working with women to help them achieve more of their goals for the last 8 years. What have you learned from that process? Is there anything that you've seen works especially well for women that we can share with our audience here to help them achieve more of their goals?
Thank you. This is my big passion. And of course, I've learned a ton in the past few years, because I've not just, built a business, but I actually traveled the world, driven women events. We've run them in New Zealand, Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, all across Europe. And of course, now online, it's global. But I've actually sat in rooms listening to women's stories, like face to face. And I've done that over 1,000 times. So I've learned immensely. And of course, I see also in the community how then women go about, getting over those hurdles and building that self-confidence. And I think the biggest hurdle or thing we women have is that we feel stuck. We procrastinate. We either make ourselves so busy on something which is not important, so that we don't have to look at the thing that we actually want to do, or that we just feel stuck and don't know kind of where to start or can't get going. And very often, especially starting a business, because it's outside of our comfort zone. And where I think that comes from is that we have been conditioned into a very masculine way of looking at success. And then many women feel out of place in that scenario, and then think that is like that we should believe in. Whereas if you start from saying, what does success mean for me? How do I want to do this? How do I want to build this? How do I want to live with my business? What is the kind of, so painting the picture of your life, and being really honest with yourself and taking time to do that and really understand that, rather than just rushing in and, oh, there must be, you know, everybody tells you to do whatever business plan and raise money and da. And I think we could get so busy in doing all of that rather than actually staying longer in doing the fundamentals and then taking action from a more honest place, and then being kind with the journey. We don't have to get there in a day, you know, we don't have to compete with X, Y, and Z. The way feminine creates is much more collaborative and organic, and it's about learning as you go. So it's really, we get to the experience, we know what the following step is. So what I would like to say to anybody who's kind of sitting on a fence or is just about to like, oh, can I do this, is know this, that you have everything you need to take the next step. And then that step will inform you of the following step. So its most important thing is to figure out what is the tiniest step you can take immediately. Because like one of our members, she and I just adore this story. So she had carried this really big idea for a business in her heart for 8 years. And she had started all sorts of other companies and done all sorts of other projects to keep herself busy and not to think about that big idea because it was too much. I mean, how could she do something like this? And the idea was to create sort of a LinkedIn type of place for charitable activities. So bringing charities, companies, and consumers together. I mean, how brilliant is that? But yeah, sure, no tech experience, you know, a blonde, you know, what can you do, right? So and she came to Driven Woman and she didn't even talk about this idea for a long time. But then, you know, in one session, we have this exercise called the dream you don't dare to tell. And everybody was sharing their dreams, because your dream is, the scarier it is, the more powerful it is. The dream you don't dare to tell is your most powerful dream. And she went like, okay, everybody else is sharing. So, well, no, okay, I'll share as well. And as soon as it was out, the solution started to come, because then we always encourage everybody to, okay, what is the smallest step without taking any risk that you can do today? So she was like, okay, well, I guess I could take like a hand video and explain my idea. So she made a 2-minute video on her phone, and then she started sending that to people. And we encouraged, okay, yeah, be ambitious and send it to, you know, like Richard Branson and whoever, and she did. Long story short, like 1 year later, she was fully funded. By today, it's now like, I think 3 years later, she's raised like hundreds of thousands of pounds. And it's called, the first launch was called whatcharity.com, but I think she's pivoted to whatimpact.com. So if you want to go and check it out, but it all started with the tiniest step and completely not believing in it. So it's just, all you have to do is string together small steps. That's all.
Yeah. I'm always telling people, just even if you just shuffle in the right direction, you know, you're moving, you're taking it going in that direction. I just love everything about what you just said. And, you know, this idea of women redefining what success means and starting with what it means to them. And I saw when I used to run a women's network in corporate, that what success means to men is all about status and power and money and all this kind of thing. But it was very different for women. Women really had more of a desire and a need to contribute, to collaborate, to build a community, to be part of something. And that was always so important to women. And they didn't have that, then that was a problem for them. And sometimes, particularly in a corporate environment, we've forgotten that, or we're not aware of that as much as we can do. And that's just the beautiful aspect of having your own business, is you can totally design success and make things happen, like that wonderful lady with the charitable LinkedIn. I love that story. And I heard some advice a while ago that said, you know, consider what your impossible dream is. And once you have that, as you were saying, that what's the dream you daren't tell anyone? Yeah. It's instead of it becoming a goal to move to, it's a place to move from. So that's your start point. Your impossible goal is your start point, and then you can start to take those like little tiptoes forward, and suddenly what you thought was impossible becomes possible. And I just love everything about what you just said there. Thank you.
Exactly. And I think that really has shown that if you just stick to the journey, I firmly believe that every woman here on the planet has the right to success and has the ability to change their circumstances and move forward. So it's more to do with like just daily steps.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Miisa, you have just shared so much value, and I was just thinking in my head, gosh, I need to make this perhaps into 2 podcasts, because it was just so much of your own story, so much wisdom, so many lessons that you've shared. Thank you so much. Before we go, is there any last piece of information? You've covered everything, but is there anything that you would really love it if every woman understood this?
It's the only way to build confidence is to become visible. Step outside of your comfort zone and see that you're still loved.
Yes.
That's
what a powerful, I've got goosebumps now. But it's so true. And I'm still waiting for the trolls to come, and it hasn't happened in I don't know how many years now of being visible. And instead you just meet so many people that do show how much they appreciate everything about you, which is just a wonderful place to be. Thank you so much, Miisa. So I'm going to put all of your contact details and links in the show notes underneath. But for anyone who's listening to this out and about, then how can they find you?
I'm very easy to find, Miisa Mink with 2 I's, 1 S, on all platforms. And I have a new room at the Clubhouse. So I run the Feminine Way room on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. GMT and Thursdays 5 p.m. GMT, where we explore all of this, defining your own success and like showing up in your feminine ways. And Driven Woman, that's driven-woman.com, and also all socials as well. So very easy to find. And if you want to tiptoe into the community, we have a free Facebook group called Doers Tribe. You'll find that on Facebook. Fantastic. Everybody's welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Miisa.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure.